My name is Ivy Thade. I am the Vice President and Director of Education here at 892. Oh, thank you. I first want to thank Anna McKinnon and her amazing Apple team for creating this space here. It's incredible. And the costumes, getting him here from Marvel. I also wanted to thank all the students and union members here today. And without further ado, I'd love to introduce my very talented and dear friend, Philip Boutte, who will be moderating this panel.
Hey everybody, nice to see you. Thank you guys for showing up on Super Bowl Sunday, which most people in this guild are like, what's that? It's a game in the, around a Rihanna concert. I'll go right into it. I'm going to give an introduction to my friend, our guest. Hey, Christian. Our guest today needs a little introduction, but I will try. Now, I could do a list of credits that she's done everything from School Days to What's Love Got to Do with It to a personal favorite of mine, Meteor Man, because it's the first time I remember seeing a superhero on screen that looked like me, to all the way to Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. This woman's done it all and has been the visual soundtrack to many of our lives for decades. But I digress. I need you to know the type of human being she is. Ruth is fearless. She is kind. She is loyal. She is forward-thinking. And to know her is to know the real truth. At one point, I was looking to step out and start designing on my own. And above all others, or those that I thought would support that venture, there stood Ruth. She asked me if I was sure. I was adamant that I wanted to try. And very shortly after that, I got a call from a producer asking me if I wanted to interview to design a series for Netflix. I had a work commitment that stopped me from taking the job, but the fact that she recommended me made me take great pause. I've been in this business since I was 3 years old as an actor, and to find someone like Ruth who has done so many amazing things and is still humble and giving is beyond rare. One look at her career will show you that she is our past, our future, and our voice. She's an example of doing our ancestors proud. She is Afro-futurism, and I'm proud to call her my friend. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my truth, Miss Ruth E. Carter.
Wow, nice looking group. Oh, wow. Phenomenal, fantastic. People who I know and people who I don't know, and it's wonderful to see you here. Thank you. All right, Phil.
Let's start. First, I guess I will keep it casual. I think it's, how do you feel after 4 nominations, now being nominated again for, you had 1 win, and now you're nominated for Wakanda Forever. How do you feel about the process, or like the fact that you've been designing for, 3 decades now? If she doesn't look it, black doesn't crack, right?
I feel like today I want to say to you that I remember my interview to join the Costume Designers Guild, and I had on black. And I just really dreamed about one day, like having an Oscar and being a proud member of the Costume Designers Guild. And hi, Bria. Oh my God, you look beautiful. And, after 3 decades of being here, it went by fast. It really did. From project to project. I just love this profession. I just love being a costume designer. From the very first day, it feels no different today. My love is still big. And I wish that for you too, as you go through this journey to the Oscar as well, that you keep that passion for costume designing always. And that's how it feels right now for me, that, my passion is even bigger. My love is even greater. And the things that I want to do with it are still manifesting over and over and over again. It never stops.
In that answer, you can hear her passion, right? One of the things that Ruth taught me, especially just being able to watch her work, is it's a job, right? So you have to love the job, but it was never about awards or fancy seasons or anything like that for her. I think the reason she's been able to sustain herself is because she actually really loves doing what she's doing, right? So I think that's important. For the topic today, I wanted to talk about or just draw attention to, for those of you that don't know, what is Afro-futurism?
Everybody wants me to define that. Jesus. Afro-futurism used to be neo-soul in the 80s, right? It was Black Power. It was a Black Power movement in the 60s. All that was Afro. We're calling it Afro-future today. But now, because we have technology and we're advancing and we're bringing all kinds of new things to the way we process costumes. If you could think about costumes back in the 60s, they looked a whole lot different than they do now. And Afrofuture is taking culture, a lot of times the cultural techniques in terms of the way that things are made, in Africa, how the Himba women stretch the calf skins and ruffle the edges and make them into clothing. And then we take those ideas and we bring them into modern times, and then we create them with new technology, whether it's 3D printing or whatever modern technology that keeps advancing, just like you upgrade your iPhone, it keeps advancing. So Afrofuture also is any culture. It doesn't necessarily mean it's African culture. It could be, we had humbucks in Black Panther 1, and we created an inclusive world. And Afrofuture, to me, means that you are thinking about all of those things that make us who we are, and we're advancing it, we're upgrading it, we're drawing in all that we know about the future into the storytelling of it.
There's something that I want to challenge you guys all to do too, just after. Go to Ruth's IMDb and look at her career. And it really does span the full diaspora, but it's also very much so like a lesson in Afrofuturism.
And you'll say, how old is she?
Yeah.
When did she start? I was 2. I was 2 years old when I started. It was really rough, but I did it.
Now, do you remember when we met on Black Panther, the first one?
Yeah.
You had just finished Roots, the reimagining of Roots. How did that help in terms of transitioning into this full, kind of Afro-futuristic world of Wakanda?
Well, when I first was told that I was going into audition with Ryan Coogler and Nate Moore for Black Panther, I was like, oh, great, the Black Panther party. Marvel's doing something in the 60s. I had no idea. And they sent me a comic book strip and a little bit to read, no script. And I was like, no script? How do you do a movie with no script? And I flew back here and I went into Marvel. And I sat in front of Nate Moore, the executive at Marvel, and Ryan Coogler. And I didn't know who Ryan Coogler was. I knew about Fruitvale Station and Creed, and I loved his films, but I was more or less wondering why I was there. I'd never done a superhero film before, and I'd heard all these stories about superhero films, how complicated they were, how many layers and technologies you had to, and I was really not feeling it. But I was excited once I realized. I called Phil.
She did.
Before the interview. I was like, Phil, what is this?
No, what she said was, she was like, you're a nerd, help me figure this out.
Well, you did. See, I was right.
It worked out.
And anyway, Ryan said, when I was a little boy, I went to see Malcom X with my dad. And I sat on his lap and watched that film, and I really loved the costumes. I remember them even as a kid. And so I was like, wow, I auditioned for Black Panther when he was a little kid, sitting on his dad's lap, and he said it was a family experience. I remember families were there. And so when the director tells you that the world that you built on a film that was period is the kind of world building that he's interested in you bringing to Wakanda Forever, you understand a whole lot more about your purpose and about what you can offer. I felt at that moment, I have experience that I can offer this young filmmaker. He loved Spike Lee's film. He said, I grew up watching Spike Lee films. I've watched all your films coming up. So I knew at that moment that I had something that I could offer. And so melding that into a futuristic model was the learning curve. And I kept, even on Black Panther 1, I kept my my African inspirations around. I needed to keep them around because I looked at that Panther suit that they had in Captain America Civil War. I had it brought to my office and put on a mannequin. And I was like, oh, I'm not impressed. There's Velcro. There's all this Velcro. And then I said, let's get Chadwick Boseman in to put the suit on. And he came in. That was one nice way of getting Chadwick in your office. He put the suit on, and then he was moving around in the fitting room and doing kind of his karate moves. And he said, yeah, but I can't breathe out of my nose and with this helmet, and I can't lift my arm above here. And I knew the story was that suit was put in at the last minute, and there were some things they needed to work out. And I said, let's work them out. Let's work them out. So then I knew, I was like, okay, this is a suit that needs to actually connect to Africa. We can go through all the processes of making a super suit, but if it doesn't have a story, if it doesn't connect to Africa, it doesn't make any sense for being there. So we came up with this little triangle we called the Okavango triangle, we named it. It's 3 points, and it means the family, the father, the mother, and the child. And it's kind of the sacred geometry of Africa. You see that triangle in so much of the artwork that when you travel from north to south, east to west, all over the continent, you will see a triangle. And so we decided to make that surface pattern. You see it in Shuri's suit out here. That surface pattern, that triangle, and that was one way. And then I thought about the Ankara fabrics that are West African fabrics and how they combine patterns together. And it has this flow about it when you look at Ankara fabric. And I thought there is a line that travels throughout the Panther suit. And at one point they wanted it to have a language traveling around, but it took forever figuring out what is the language saying. Everyone's going to be asking us what the language is saying. So it ended up being just tribal striations with a medallion in the middle. And that Okavango triangle combined with that line work that was traveling throughout the suit really did combine to make an African tapestry. And I felt really good about how we infused the story, the storytelling, the African symbolism, the tradition with this superhero model. And that's how we came up with that.
There's something that when you listen to Ruth speak and she's naming these terms, right? One of the things you need to understand, especially about her as a costume designer, she's been doing this for so long, she doesn't notice it, but there's a lot of knowledge and research in there, right? So it's like, I remember being overwhelmed. We were in the office and she had all of these boards up that had all these different tribes and then all the different tribes of Wakanda in it. And it was all this information. It was completely overwhelming. And she was just like, oh yeah, that's this, that's that, that's that. And we were talking about the initial kind of phases of the inception of Black Panther. And so I'll tell you kind of like where her knowledge comes in handy, right? Which is, I would say, like, I'll tell her something nerdy about Black Panther about, oh, it's here and it's this and it's vibranium, and she's like gold. And then I'm like, oh, it's T'Challa, and she's like Mansa Musa. Like, she knew the history, so she was able to pull historical information back and then push it into Afro-futurism conceptually, right?
But I have help. Stacy.
Yes.
Stacy Caballero is one of my ACDs. She keeps the brain organized. She keeps everything you say moving forward. Like, you can say something, and if it doesn't move forward, who cares? Stacy makes it move forward, People can go back to Stacy and say, what did she say? She said this. That didn't look anything like what I said, but that is what I said. And Bria Holmes, Bria, how difficult was that? She dressed all of those people in white in Wakanda Forever. Oh my God, I feel like crying. And Paul King, all of my ideas, and he's like, okay, let me figure out how to draw that. Christian Cordello, how we got all of those underwater characters, just figuring it out. I'm so sorry, Christian, I put you through all of that, but we did it. We did it. And that's part of the collaboration. It's much bigger than what meets the eye. It's so big. And every time you have a conversation with a director, every time you have a conversation with anyone, there's a team that, settles into it and says, this is, Ruth, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want this? Do you want that? And that happens every day, all day with that research. What is this part? Can you, and the illustrators, when I first started working with Phil, I had tripods in front of their computers. I was like, okay, get me some tripods. These guys need research in front of them all day. It's not just going to come out of their head. I was like, this is not The Lion King, folks. This is not Coming to America either. I'm going to show you what it is. But that was important because everybody comes to the table from a different perspective. I might have grown up knowing about Kwanzaa and learning Kiswahili and the principles of Blackness. And, it was important for my family to teach me about my history. And so I come to the table with some knowledge, but that's not everybody on your team. Everybody's going to have a different knowledge base, and now you have to collectively pull them up to what you want. Everybody had an idea on Black Panther 1 what this was. Oh yes, I've done thousands of Marvel films, and throughout the process, we always do it like this. And if I heard that once, I heard it 1,000 times. And I said, oh, okay, well, show me. What is it? What's it like? Give me an idea. I have no idea. I'm here for the first time. And it was different than what we wanted to make. There was nothing wrong with it. It was just different than what we wanted to make. And it helped me kind of say, okay, let me collect some of the things that I know are more authentic, more indigenous, more cultural, more sound, and I had some things from Roots Reboot that were made in Africa by hand, some beautiful leather work, some beadwork, and I brought it in. And I was like, this is what the Dora Milaje have to feel like. They have to feel like this.
Was there anything, just in talking about that, is there anything that you didn't have on the first one that you had in the second one and you wish you would have had it in the first one?
Oh. Listen, I'll admit it to you, the doors are closed, right? Everything's locked up inside. The first one was a movie with prototypes. It was all prototypes. I mean, when we got the Kingsguard in Atlanta, it wasn't even put together. It didn't have attachments, and we were just learning what we were doing as we went along, and so when we all came together on Wakanda Forever, it was like, oh, we get a chance to take these prototypes and learn from our mistakes and redo it. And some things actually didn't need redoing. Some of those prototypes were pretty daggone okay. But we had a new story. We were going underwater. We had materials we had to re-examine. We had to figure out we couldn't put those Dora Milaje in water, so we had to have them molded and made waterproof. And so there was a lot of things that we learned from the first one and had to relearn again going into the second one.
You brought it up, so let's talk about it a little bit. What was it like designing costumes that had to play underwater?
Yeah, I said the next time someone calls me to do a film and they mention water, I would hang up. So is that
answers the question. Yeah.
No, it was difficult. We had a 20-foot tank on the stage, and they said, anytime you want to put something in water to test it, just, the tank is there. You could just go on over there. And we were like, yeah, but we don't have any lighting. We don't have a camera. So we knew, though, that those raffia skirts that the Jabari were wearing was not going to work. And there were a lot of things we had to tether. You go on YouTube and you look at, water ballet, beautiful water ballet underwater. We were watching all of those videos, right, Stacey? We were watching them and thinking, oh, beautiful. That's how our costumes are going to be. And when they got underwater, they just went up like this. Or right in front of someone's face. And so we had to weight them and tether them and decide not to do them. So it was a learning process. Also, the chemicals that they use, whether it's salt or whatever the chemicals are, there have to be chemicals in the water. And guess what? That fades the fabric. So Sharon Flavel, she researched a chemical process, and she was able to wash our costumes before they went in the water to make them color fast. And we had free divers that were swimming in this tank, and none of them wanted to have anything on. They just want to have a Speedo or a swimming suit. And I was giving them like a headdress and a wrap and kelp and leaves. And they kept, after a while, they got used to me. And I was trying to keep ear spools in their ears. And I was like, don't shake your head so much. So it was really hard. It was, I think, the hardest thing I've ever done.
There was a moment where, because me and Ruth were in separate places on this one. I was in visual development, right? So I was at Marvel, and I would call her all the time because I would be confused. So I would call her because they would be like, come up with these, these underwater Talokanil people, right? So I'm designing and drawing and figuring things out. And I would call her and be like, I just feel conceptually like they wouldn't be wearing any clothes. And then I would ask Ruth, and Ruth would be like, look at this. And it would be like this full, then I was like, okay, so I was trying to kind of figure it out. But it was a good balance of trying to figure out what do you wear and then how does it work, right? And then she started to share with me technical aspects of how these clothes could work underwater, which I thought was really fascinating. But doing it in practice is a whole nother thing, which I think you guys did beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to draw back. Oh, go ahead. Please. I want to draw back a little bit to the fact that you had a really big crew. You had an international crew. How did you kind of manage those parts and work with everybody? I mean, I know that some of them are here, so that'll be a good kind of thing to kind of open up to be like...
Everybody who was a part of Wakanda Forever, please stand. Nice. Thanks for coming, and thank you for still being my friend. What was your question?
Just like how it was to manage things, so maybe we can open it up like to even some of the ACDs and talk.
Okay, so Christian Cordello, you and I worked on the illustrations for the underwater people. And how did that feel for you?
I mean, working, of course, like for Wakanda, it was really like a gift, and when we wrote, we were like talking about these people under the water, right? Yeah. Like even Phil said, you think about something sleek, like more bodysuit. And when, Ruth was like, let's make them like, flowy or something that even like, could have maybe possible shoes. I was like, well, that is very interesting to be able to give something that, I never see that, and it was very challenging also, from an illustration point of view to make sure that these clothes somehow they would float in the water, because there's a different kind of feeling than when they are outside. Yeah. So it was really like an amazing process that I felt so lucky to be part of.
Oh, great, Christian. And we also talked about how what's underwater kelp, and then the Mayans, the fact that they had this, we found from the Dresden Codex and all the research and the pottery that they had sheer fabrics. And so we printed sheer fabrics, and those were some of the ones that were represented in the drawings that we could, use, flowers and things that would be organic under the water. And then spondylus shell and jade and obsidian and these natural things that that went back centuries for the Mayans that we could still use. And so we blended what was on the bottom of the ocean. We asked the oceanographers, what's on the bottom of the ocean? Like, they're like, bones, lots of bones. So we're like, great, bones. And then, the great Josh Nizzi came up with a tuma with that big hammerhead shark headpiece that was amazing. And Namora with her lionfish fin costume. And the lionfish is no bigger than like the size of your hand. It's a small fish. It only gets maybe 10 inches long. And yet she's got this, magnificent, she was a lionfish, right? And so we looked at the concept of the fact that the Mayans used rubber, and we could actually make things that felt like it was rubber and make them bigger to honor their cohabitants in the ocean, and not be something that, they're harvesting fish fins and making costumes out of. So it was like really nice to see how we combined all of that together too.
I want to draw attention to this too because of the technical aspect of it and talking about the design and kind of like figuring things out in the drawing. Paul, I've heard that you take your iPad everywhere with you. So I want you to kind of explain what
even on vacation. Do you follow Paul King? You got to follow Paul King's vacations too. He draws on vacation.
Yeah.
But he's a wonderful, wonderful illustrator.
I'm no difference than a 2-year-old. I wake up in the morning and look for my iPads. And when I come home to the house, I look to my iPad. It's not more than anything. It's like I just start to look, because it's easier to look at. It's like everything is too small on the phone. So I use my iPad a lot. And then when I work with Ruth, it's like, everyone's doing it in Photoshop. And I was like, oh, I forgot my Photoshop skill. I used to do that when I was teaching. Then I resigned because Ruth offered me this job to do Wakanda. I was going like, I got to do a really good job on this project. I have to resign from my job. So I learned to use the Procreate on my iPad every single day. It was a learning process. And, I could see myself growing.
Yes.
Every single week.
Yes. Paul comes to my house all the time. And we go through hundreds of line sketches. We had so many Namoras. We love looking at fashion. We get excited when we think about, was it Alexander McQueen that we were looking at?
That was
Atlantis.
First thing we looked at was the Atlantis, and I remember I went into your
and that was really inspiring.
I have to say it was a really, really fun production, but it was really intense, and it was difficult. It was like taking SAT daily. I don't know what's going to be on my table. And I wake up in the morning, I just text Ruth, good morning, Ruth, that's 8 a.m. She's like, okay, this is what you're doing today. So it's like, by 5 o'clock, I got picked up by Messenger, and I just create. It's like, it's all about just developing whatever she's inspired by that day.
And
we had illustrators all around the world. We had a great team. And because at 8 o'clock, I'd already been up 5 hours talking to people in Siberia and where is Nick, Stacy, in the Netherlands? How was that for you, Stacy? Stacy was like, she wasn't really a fly on the wall, but if you could imagine a fly on the wall who's like organizing a whole bunch of folders for people and taking notes and making sure that everything that we're doing is all put together.
And Stacey, was there any technology that you used to manage all of that?
Yes, actually, it was my iPads again. Yeah. I have it on my watch. When I leave home, I can tell what my iPads are. Like, it reminds me of I just love my iPads, like just like a kid. But at one time, I was managing 13 concept artists and 2 graphics artists all around the world. And we started in July of 2020. And then Chadwick passed in August of 2020. So we did some regrouping, and, Ryan and Joe went back and rewrote the script, and they let us keep designing. So we spent a good chunk of time just researching. We had historians, consultants from every part, Mayan consultants. We had underwater diving, free divers. Like, we were reaching out to just about everybody just to get the information so we knew how to design. But working globally was amazing.
I would say to Stacy, it was like, I see this artist, and they do, can you find them? And she's like, where did you see it? I can't even pronounce their name.
It was somebody I would reach out, and we couldn't say what we were working on. So I felt like I was a precor. I would go and talk to them, and I couldn't mention Ruth's name. I couldn't mention Marvel. So it was like, hey, what do you like doing? Do you like superhero? And then they would look at my IMDb, and they were like, oh, you did some interesting stuff. And then I would kind of reel them in, and then they would sign an NDA, and then I would say, okay, you're working with Ruth Carter. And they were like, well, wow. You're working with Marvel, wow. And then they would all be into it. But we were on like so many different time zones all the time. But my favorite was I would tell somebody in Gosha in Russia that had a lot to do with this costume of Ramonda. And we would go to bed, and then I would wake up and he had it there. And then I would always like give notes before I showed it to Ruth, but it was like Gosha uploaded, Naik uploaded, Paul uploaded, Christian uploaded, like during the day, all the time.
You have to be real organized to work with this one. Yes. She's real good at coming into your desk, and she'll have something that she found, and she's like, this is it. And you'll be like, what do you? And she's like, this is it. And she just like disappears, and you're like, no, she always comes back, but it was just fun. You have to keep up to make sure that you're keeping up with her creative brain, because she's always finding something.
And then Bria, listen, you guys got to give Bria a little pat on the back when you see her, because she went through hell with me, hell and back. And it's only because, like, when you're addressing background, especially for the big funeral scene, and, cloth just doesn't come in white in African cloth. It's usually colorful, right? And so we were making a lot of decisions on the patterns, after we draped people, after we dressed them, what we needed to do to the cloth. Or some of the cloth was treated beforehand and printed beforehand. And Bria is just a little soldier, just like going around the whole workroom, just making sure that the Asia dyers have the stuff. I mean, there were racks and racks and racks of clothes in white. And it all had sort of an African direction. It all felt tribal. We were painting beads. Talk about that, Bria.
She thinks that she gave me hell, but she really didn't, because I like the challenge. I was like, what else you got? And she was like, I'm sorry. But the research and the different tribes and stuff that we explored, and just it was a wild process. In terms, it ended with a beautiful result too as well, and the painting of the beads and learning about the different tribes and going into detail to the point where we can tell what's what just by looking at somebody. Like, you're that person, you're that tribe. But yeah, it definitely was one for the books for sure.
And then we got a lot of North African fabric, the Tuareg stuff, and it had the indigo dye that dyed our hands, dyed our faces. It was all over our clothes. Yeah. So what a wonderful experience to dress the background for this film. Just how many people that came through, and then how many stories that we could tell. And some of it was traditional. We did do the Warrior Falls, and that was all traditional. And oh my God, that day where everyone came in, and you're wrapping turbans all day, and really feeling like we're doing something important.
There were some subtle details that I really liked that I noticed. Specifically, one of the cool things about working, like I told you guys before, is on this specifically, especially as an African American, right? Like I'm Westernized, right? So working on the first one and the second one with Ruth, it was the first time that I felt like I understood African culture, where I was actually looking at it, where I could actually say, she'd say, this symbol means this, these beads are this color because of this, right? And some of the subtle details were in there, like you had the himba braid, right? But you guys put the kind of hat.
Yeah, we turned it into a military hat.
So she turned it into a military hat. So it's like that hook braid, right? It's the little details that she kind of notices and then kind of conceptualizes and makes them better. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the technological advances, like in terms of taking something that you saw and then bumping it up with the use of technology?
Well, we had 9 superheroes. We introduced 9 superheroes in Wakanda Forever. That's a lot. We had a brand new military faction, the Navy. And I kept asking Marvel's visual development department, I'm like, you guys are doing that, right? You guys are like the Navy, you guys are doing that, right? I'd ask, you guys are doing that, right? And they were like, no. So we were like really scared. And we had to come up with a military, the Navy. And we used Nick in the Netherlands because he had these drawings that he had done for something, I don't know what. But he was using the ranking, or I envisioned that he was using ranking as this jewelry. And so when you have like the septum, that was a rank. When the jewelry from the nose to the ear, that was a rank. Using that himba braid as a hat, but also putting a device on it became a rank. And so I was excited about making a ranking system for the Navy. And then because there were really no speaking roles in this Navy, I'm like, then why is it there? We had to make it all in-house. It wasn't something that we could send over to the great film illusions, Rush Schenkel, the great film illusions. We couldn't send it over there because we had to budget it. We had to get it in. And so we created that in-house. We had 3D printers. We had a jewelry designer also make all of the ranking jewelry. And then we combined all of it once we got it to Atlanta. And it was there was so much to it. Like, how did we do that? Why did we do that? Why didn't we just make it a simple sheath? But we had to print the fabric. We used matka to print this mud cloth striations on it. And, I learned a lot about matka. That you really, you can't really dye it that well. It dyes beautifully, but you get those slubs that looks like lint all over the whole thing. And so that was like a shock and a sadness. And then we had Adidas print the compression that went underneath it. And it just was like one layer, one, huge thing after the next, but we did it. But 9 superheroes in one film, honestly.
Yeah.
That's way too much. Don't clap.
You're getting the tame version of that question. The cultural element. So like right now we have Namor or his headdress here, and then we also have Ramonda.
Yep.
So let's talk about a little bit in terms of like the tech and then how that kind of came about.
Okay, this is a beautiful costume, right? As done at the Weta workshop. If you ever get an opportunity to go there, to work with them, to talk to them, take it, because their level of craftsmanship is not happening everywhere. They mold in clay. They do the computer renderings. They did Avatar. And so what happened with this, we decided to use this kelp for the headdress, and it's very stiff. And that's because visual effects wanted to do the movement. So we actually had another version of this that we made in Atlanta that was fur, that was feathers and fabrics and all kinds of things that would move in the water. And visual effects wanted to shoot it with this headdress that had this beautiful movement, so that when we made this one, we could make the kelp stiff, and they would do the movement in post-production. So when you see this headpiece in the movie, it is actually moving, and that's what they're doing. Then the front of this, it's a combination of blue jade, which we had determined that the blue jade was the vibranium of the Talokanils. And there's mother of pearl, there's all these elements that represent the water. But the serpent head is the feathered serpent, and that's direct from Mayan culture and Kukulkan. And the serpent head was a different head when we were done with this. It was a different design. And the historian, Dr. Gerardo Aldana, took a look at it, and I don't know, he didn't see this beforehand. I know he saw it. But he said, you can't use that because it's not post-classic Mayan. People would think we don't know what we're talking about. It's pre-classic Mayan. It dates it hundreds of years prior to, and you have to change it. So just as they were ready to deliver this headpiece, we had to change it because, Ryan Coogler is very much a advocate of us being authentic and accurate and representing the cultures properly, and so did we, of course. And so we redid it like in a week. They redid it. So this is the feathered serpent, and in Chichen Itza, there's a pyramid. It's called Kukulkan, and on the staircase that descends the pyramid are two feathered serpents. And they travel down the stairwell, and they are kind of spindly all the way down. At the bottom is the serpent head, and it's open mouth, and it's facing a cenote. So when you see Namor's battle costume, the other one that he wears, he has this neck piece that has the two serpents, and they're both open mouth. In the center is a pearl that represents the water. And Anthony Francisco, I never pronounce his last name, Francisco, is the person who actually conceived the idea. And it went through many meetings. And I think that's what makes doing costumes like this so high level, because many artists are involved. It's not only a concept on a piece of paper or on a computer screen. It actually comes to another person, and it affects them as an artist, and they get to put their art into it. It comes to me, and then I see things another way. And by the time it's materialized, it has a full story. And that's the thing I think is important to remember, that all movies are collaborations, not just these that have these illustrators of the stars and... Sorry, Christian. I love you. But it also is a part of the whole filmmaking process.
The whole filmmaking process is actually really important, because I think a lot of the times we see the same people over and over again, but what you miss is the full collaborative process, especially even in just costume, right? There's so many people that work in our department, and everything kind of gets passed by them. It's like a conveyor belt, right?
Including Larry.
Yeah.
Larry keeps me on time.
I want to talk about, too, we have one of Angela Bassett, or Queen Ramonda's costume minus Angela Bassett's arms here.
So this one is Julia Corner, who did the Ishikolo and the collar. She did that 3D rendering through a 3D printer. And then Dorian, there were earrings to this, and there was front piece there that has the gems. There's a girl named Dorian who's jewelry smith. She did the front. The idea behind the totem dress that she's wearing has a lot to do with the first costume that she wore in BP1. In BP1, when we are on the landing pad and T'Challa exits the ship and they walk up, you know exactly who the queen is. And she has a dress there that has symbols on it. And so we wanted to introduce her with this totem dress the same way we did in the first movie, but this time she's the ruler. She's not just the soft, pretty queen. She's the ruler. And we added the device. As Stacy said, Gosha, Gosha didn't speak any English. Okay, a little bit. I'm going to tell the story. And we used Dimitri at La Cienega Cleaners to be our interpreter. Stacy found him. Stand up, Stacy, and take a bow. And so there's like this language of armor that's on this costume, and it's the chest piece. It's the line work on the chest piece. And Dorian interpreted that in metal. And so we wanted to keep that as a theme for Ramonda, that she wears armor. And so you see it on the beach. You see it. There's another neck piece that Dorian made that has Dogon symbols on it when she dies in the flood. And boy, this is a master class, right? I mean, how much time do you have?
You guys also don't understand what Dorian was doing. Dorian was on the first one as well. Like when we talk about like she's making jewelry, she's literally sitting there and hand pounding this jewelry.
Yeah, and on the first one, she was above my office, and I was like, you guys.
It actually worked out. In the first one, she was above the office, and it was driving her crazy because you could just hear the pounding, right? So then I got the pleasure of Ruth is actually my first black boss, right? So she's the first black boss I had, which is a whole nother problem, but we'll talk about it later. She was the first black boss in terms of like the first time I'd had a black costume designer, right? So for me, it felt good to
Francine or Michelle?
Oh,
Michelle said.
No, you were the first one. You're the first one. Love Michelle. You were the first one. Also, it felt good to come to work and not have to code switch at all. And because of the pounding, we had great music. So I was like, she's playing Earth, Wind, and Fire over here. I'm like, this is a great day at work. So that was part of my experience. But yeah, when you see all of these things, there's a whole, it's not just like some of it, at least the hat, right? The Ishikola, it's 3D printed.
South African married woman's hat. Yes. And in the comics, Ramonda, she's like chill. She walks around in yoga pants, barefoot, she's chill. And so we changed that in the movies because of the significance of her role. And also there are a lot of like Easter eggs to how she's dressed, how the door is dressed, Shuri's first entrance into the film. We actually, the bare arms is a theme. And it represents the beauty of women, the power, the strength, and the vulnerability. So you see the Dora carry T'Challa's casket, and they are with their bare arm. You see Shuri enter the lab with one sleeve removed. And you see Ramonda enter the UN, and there's a scene when she's on her throne in a vibranium dress with the arms exposed.
You did a lot of collaborations in this one too. Can you talk about some of those, like with Adidas, Iris? Like, can you talk about the collab?
Yeah, you know how it is. How many are costume designers in here? Come on, you know how it is. Raise your hand, Stacy. You have to collaborate all the time. They make all these deals. On the first Black Panther, we weren't proven. Nobody cared about us. It was really gray. Nobody bothered us. It was hard to do, but we didn't have the influences of, actually Nike turned us down. You remember when Shuri goes, what are those, right? And we heard his sandals morph into a tennis shoe. We asked Nike, and they're like, I don't know about you guys. And so Adidas did it. Now Adidas has a seed program. It's seed experimental education and design. I forgot what the S stands for. And they approached me and they approached Marvel and said, can you work with these young women who are the future of athletic fashion? And I said, sure. And so we were on Zooms with these young designers who were introducing all this new stuff, the tennis shoe with the hollow sole, and we worked together on the storytelling, because that's the one thing that I think you will agree that fashion designers don't always get the storytelling part, and so we were insistent on color, the purple for the royal family. We were also insistent on the back of the jacket having a swing effect, so when she's on the motorcycle, it would fly. And there were elements of it that we thought were really important that we had to make sure they did, and they did it. Also, Iris Van Herpen. Philip first on BP1 told me that Iris was using 3D printing with her work, and that's how we met Julia Corner at UCLA. She was the one who was working with Iris, and we brought her in on the first one. We brought her back on the second one, but this time we brought in Iris. And those calls were really early in the morning. Iris was lovely. We were excited. We earmarked some designs that Paul detailed in great detail. The beautiful jade necklace that Shuri wears was detailed by the great Paul King, and the cape, the lionfish cape that she wears. The only problem with fashion is that it doesn't go in the water. So we had this beautiful cape that was made by Iris Van Herpen in her atelier in, where is she? She's in the Netherlands too. And we got it in Atlanta, and we said, it's going in the water. She was like, I don't think so. And I was kind of glad not to put it in the water. We had to make a second one in our shop. We were like, hey, if we knew we could make this ourselves, we would have done it from the beginning. But, it didn't have the Iris touch. And so we remade it to go in the water. So a lot of times that's, our situation, needing more than one. And this was a super complicated cape that Paul was so instrumental in helping us get to the end result of the design for bridging the gap between fashion and storytelling and costume design. There is a gap. And the other collaborators were Oswald Boateng, also, who else? Hervé Leger. They were big. You notice a lot of Shuri's lab looks were that pleated knit from Hervé Leger. Who else? Oh, 8th Generation is the Native American company that we had do the Lesotho blankets. You remember the Lesotho blankets from South Africa? And we asked them for permission to use those blankets. And then I think there was a big hoopla afterwards, They were like, well, we said yes, but we didn't realize it was going to be in the Black Panther film. And so we had to make up our own blanket designs, our own Wakandan prints. And that was important anyway. I felt like Wakandan prints were important to be only for Wakanda. And even though connecting them to South Africa was, really beautiful for the first film as well. Blaine, we had a graphic artist named Blaine. He's fabulous. He's in South Africa. Okay. We had a lot of collabs.
There was a lot of collabs. But what I want you guys, I asked this question on purpose because Ruth is very forward thinking. A lot of the times people will do collabs, but what they're really doing is just they're looking at something fashion and they're just kind of like turning it in their own thing. The ability for her to collaborate and take her team and then bring all of those designers and people like in and out of that world is incredible. And it's also a lot of work to manage all those moving parts and to design with people and egos and things like that. The lack of ego for her to be able to bring people into that process and do it is monumental.
This one was made in India. Most of Queen Ramonda's costumes were made at J.J. Balaya, World of Balaya in India. And we found him on Coming to America. So
We have like one more, and then we're going to open it up. I have a fun question.
how many of you saw the first Black Panther? And how many of you saw it more than one time? Oh, okay. And how many of you saw Wakanda Forever? Great. Many questions in the audience.
I've heard you telling the story about how you told each cast member that their costume specifically was your favorite. Did any of them ever find out? Did you get caught?
I would sometimes do that as I walk through all of them together on set. I'd say, oh my God, you look fantastic. You know, this is my favorite costume. And then I'd take 2 steps and I'd say, wow, Mbaku, you know, this is my favorite costume.
That's the moment.
I think we're going to open it up to Q&A now. So let's see, does anybody have any questions?
Please, let her rip. This is the Costume Designers Guild.
Hi there. First, I would like to say thank you so much for talking about your work today. It's been really, truly a pleasure to hear everything and hear from your collaborators. So that's been really, really great. So thank you so much. I guess my question really revolves kind of around the culture of the movie. Really looking at this movie, it's been a really great kind of reminder of the strength of the African and the Black community, and really thinking about how this movie has really gone in development alongside of the Black Lives Matter movement and the George Floyd travesty and everything like that. I was wondering if you ever felt maybe the pressure of being a part of a movie that was going to be so impactful to the community during such a tough time.
It doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like responsibility, and it also feels like an opportunity, right? Like the way, if you went out to any of the marches, like the way you felt when you were making your sign and you were going to get out there. And that's the same feeling that I have when I'm thinking about how impactful some of our work will be. And that's why it's important to infuse as much detail in the costumes and as much story in the costumes, because it does have an impact on little boys and little girls and the African diaspora. But everyone went to see Black Panther and wore their traditional costume. People were inspired to unite. You know, it was a way of uniting Africa. So it's not pressure, it's opportunity.
Some more questions? Don't be shy.
Come on.
Here we go.
This is the Costume Designers Guild.
Hi, I'm very curious about all the technology that went into some of these costumes. For instance, I'm thinking maybe it's 3D printing, but then I'm not sure what the kelp is. Is there wire there? I see using leather braiding down below, and I'm just wondering how all that developed and what different methods you used.
Thank you. So this was done at the Weta Workshop in New Zealand, right? And they carved in clay the serpent head first. And then once I approved the carving, then it went into a mold. And they molded the serpent head without the jade pieces. The jade pieces were rendered on computer and 3D printed, and then a mold was made of the jade to make it in the silicone, and then they poured the color and mixed the color right in the silicone. It also has like little flecks in it to have this little reflective quality, so there was a pouring process to that. The same concept went into creating the kelp leaves. They actually, do look at real kelp, and they get all of the little texture details. They create a mold, they pour silicone, they color the silicone, pull it out, and then do hand painting on top. They do have a person who does tapestry work and braiding, and so his tabard down the front of this costume is hand done. We discuss like the different elements, like there's a metal ring here, there's some shell work. This part here is also rendered on computer first. Then there's a print made, then there's a mold, and it's pulled and it's painted. So those guys are badass. We actually buy the pearls and add the pearls, the shells. The shells, I don't believe those are rendered. I believe they're painted from some found elements. Yeah. Yep. We're doing all this on Zoom, by the way.
Hello, Ruth. Over here. Hi. My name is Ava. I'm a fashion student at Otis. I'm so happy to be here and to hear you speak. My question for you, you have an incredible ability to fuse traditional and contemporary ideas, to pay homage to historical cultures and traditions, and also to be able to blend them with contemporary ideas to create believable and authentic new worlds. My question for you is, when working on a film such as this, how do you think about the balance between designing these costumes? How do you make sure that there is equal representation in a way that is meaningful, respectful, and correct? Especially with the newer story with the Mesoamerican and Mayan cultures and the new technological ideas to create the Talokanil nation.
Whew, how much time do you have? I think we all love fashion, right? We can't ignore it. And we're always looking at different ideas that exist around. What is everybody doing out there? And, how are they representing their culture? There were Mayan artists that we looked at. We looked at painters, modern painters that were Mexican. We are always trying to learn. And during that learning process, I think we're influenced by a lot of the things that we see and get excited about and want to bring into the fray of the story. And we pass a lot by our historians, and we get approvals or disapprovals. We had a lot of folders with research, and our first historian basically separated everything between Aztec and Mayan. And our Aztec side was huge. And we're like, we can't use any of that. So we make those decisions as we go along, fashion decisions, cultural decisions, and we're always sharing that. We're sharing that with the director. He has a whole learning curve that he's experiencing. And so there was one thing like little faces, I'll say little faces on the Mayan costumes that we were illustrating at first. And it was the director who said, I know that some of that was around these little faces, but there is this problem with interpretation of Mayan culture that they shrink heads, that they were doing some practices that were unsettling, and we don't want to perpetrate those myths. So we're not going to have small faces on our costumes. And so there is a collaborative, like you cannot design this in a vacuum by yourself. You have to share all the time. You have to be brave, because a lot of times it's your best idea that gets thrown out, but you have to be brave about it and share it, because in the end, you'll come up with another idea, and it'll be a more appropriate idea that will infuse fashion and technology, and everyone's language will be the same.
something else you guys should be aware of too is just how much work goes into trying to get it right. So even if something makes the screen, there's always going to be someone that's upset about something, right? But there's a lot of work just culturally. I mean culturally, but I think that there's a lot of people behind the scenes trying to make sure that it's accurate and also that it becomes a sense of pride, right?
Who else?
How many iterations of that costume exist? How many times did you have to make it, redo it, and where are the others?
Actually, it's too complicated to make many iterations. There's only one. And the only other piece of this that exists is the front of the serpent head that we had to remove and redo. But it's too long of a process. It's too detailed of a process to say, oh, we have one. Do you like it? You don't like it? Okay, we'll do another one. No, there's one. And everyone sees it as it's being made. They do videos, they send photographs, they send details of how they're going to braid every element of it, and it's all approved in advance. So by the time it's done, don't act like you didn't know. Don't act like you didn't see this coming.
And how much?
6 months of work.
I'm sorry, I'm asking you a budgetary question. How much is that costume?
I have no idea.
Stacey, do you know? Yeah.
They're expensive.
They're expensive.
And when we made that change, we had to put our heads together on what part of it was going to change, and then put through another budget request just to have that frontal piece redone. And on a rush.
I could give you a little bit of an answer, at least in terms of scale. The first Captain America prototype, so the very first one that had very little hard surface stuff, was like $600,000. For what?
That didn't cost.
It didn't cost that much, but I'm saying, like, you can tell I think if you balance, right?
Yeah. I think like the Dora costumes are. I don't know. I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie.
I'm putting it off of there, but there's a lot of work and there's a lot of money involved.
And don't think that means that we have full reign to do all kinds of stuff. Don't think that that's enough. Everything is like a sliding scale. Everything is, you know what I mean.
Hello.
Well, I was going to ask about the total costume budget, but we don't have to go there.
Trying to get us in trouble.
$10 billion.
Yeah.
Don't think that that's just frivolous money. It wasn't enough.
No, that's not enough for what? How many superheroes again?
9.
No, it's not enough.
And a military.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sabrina, and I'm from Otis as well. And I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you did this whole process over Zoom. And I personally had to learn my first skills in sewing, like with my classmates, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. So I'd love to hear how you tackled that. Like, even though you're well-versed and you have experience in the field, how COVID and Zoom changed that whole thing for you.
Well, I had done a film with Stacey, and that was helpful that we already had a relationship and that we could discuss how we were going to approach it with Zoom. The upside of Zoom was that everybody is up front. Everyone's like, face is right there. We're sharing screen. Boom. Here's our presentation. Presentations were examined and examined and examined. There was an opportunity, because those presentations were right in your face, that if someone did a wonderful video of their work, you could put it in your presentation, and it was presented in the way that you wanted them to see it. A lot of time on BP1, we were in a conference room looking at all the illustrations from every illustrator, every person who was doing things. And, when you're in a conference room, there is a little bit of an aesthetic distance, And with the Zoom, I think we were all very nervous and wanted to really immerse ourselves into like the design of it. So we did several presentations. Our presentations were always on the same day that Marvel did a presentation. So production design would go one day, and then Viz Dev and costumes would go another day, because we were speaking the same language of costume. And so it was important to see everything together and we were talking and evaluating and deciding and morphing and changing. That was the upside. The downside was that you couldn't pick things up. You couldn't feel the weight. You couldn't be together, especially after we lost Chadwick. We actually couldn't really mourn until we did that scene at the funeral, and when we were actually together on set. So there was that. But I really think that a movie with this much aesthetic work was serviced by being on Zoom. People were at home with their families. You could, a baby was crawling on somebody's lap in the middle of a Zoom call, and you were like, oh, everybody was. And so it did something that we didn't get in the boardroom. And I think also, working with the illustrators, it was nice to share screen, to just be that close to the art. I think it actually helped us a lot, and I think it's changed the way we do things forever. But it wasn't until we actually got down and dirty. I'm looking at Bria when I say we got down and dirty in Atlanta, and we actually started the physical work of dressing people and getting costumes on backs and going through stunt work and painting people blue, did we not really understand what we were building. So one does not negate the other.
Yep.
Hi, my name's Melissa. I have just a question about how you feel when you're starting these projects, because Black Panther 1 and 2 are films that I went to the theater and then felt grateful that I could later on pause my screener 100 times and be like, what is that? What is that made out of? How could they possibly have done that or come up with it? And when I watch your films, or a lot of these huge motion, comic films that they're making now, I wonder about, do you ever get scared? Did you ever have moments? Well, I just think, not because I'm a fan of yours, but in this film, but I feel like if I even thought about designing this, I would just put my head under the pillow and just say, no way, I'm not available.
Yeah.
And start crying. And so when I watched these, I watched the Wakanda Forever again, on DVD recently, and I couldn't even fathom it. Like, do you have those moments where you're just like, I'm not available today, guys. I'm taking a mental health day.
Yeah, I wish I could do that.
But do you feel
a mental health day?
Do you feel it, or
that sounds wonderful?
Do you feel that, or you just kind of go through the process?
I do, but it's collaborative. It's teamwork. It's dissection. And actually, I have a way of like segmenting everybody. So when I'm dealing with one section, I'm dealing with a ACD that's dealing with that Shanna Connect. How do you pronounce her? Connect. Did the Dora and the submersibles, and everybody has their lane. And so I'm like going to each lane and having a separate conversation. It's almost like they're all like separate movies. And that helps. And I think the way that we organize our day also helps. People have to actually get in my calendar. They have to actually schedule a meeting to talk about whatever it is that we're talking about. And I get to choose whether I'm ready for that or not. And we're all looking at research. And if someone needs support, we have a plethora of people to support each other, and that also helps. So, the team actually makes the work seem like it's working, not easy, not difficult, just that it's working. And so when we have to pivot or when we're asked to do something at the last minute, there are certain team players that are involved with those pivots and changes. And that helps. But it is overwhelming most of the time. There's this thing called cortisol. It happens right around here. It lodges itself to your body, and it has everything to do with stress. And it took me years to realize that yoga and breathing and having someone to talk to and just being responsible for yourself. I find that if I stretch in the morning, like I actually have more ideas. Like for some reason, all of that, endorphins start working for me. And so I encourage that. Sometimes we do yoga like in front of the building at work. And, that's what helps you on the journey. But when you look back at the journey, you go, how did I do that? How did we do that? And it is we. It belongs to all of us that touch these costumes. And it's incredible to see it in the end, but it doesn't feel like that in the journey.
I would say, too, to think about it in sections, right? You see the end product, but then A, she doesn't have time. So she doesn't have time to stress out about things. And then B, it's sections. She goes back and forth between creative brain and then functional. And then there's too many parts, right?
I was hi, Chanel. I'm with the Guild here. That was a great lead into what I wanted to ask was, how did you take care of yourself? And did you ever take a day off? And then your family, did you?
If I tried to take a day off, there'd be 6 people calling me. Like, I know this is your day off, but can you just make a decision on this one thing?
Even like a Sunday.
Reach out to her on a Saturday or Sunday. I'm so sorry if the Saturday's like, we're making a movie.
Just hit me with what you need. Because we were working globally, so.
Is that about like a year and a half?
Let's see, July. I came on in July, and then we didn't shoot probably for a year. And yeah.
I was on it for a year and 8 months. I think I was on a year and 6 months.
So how did you take care of yourself?
I had a coach. I have a life coach. And she's like my best friend. I'm like,
is it a daily meeting?
It's 3 days a week. We do yoga. And then 1 day a week, we do a session of talking. And we just talk stuff out. And it's been a lifesaver. Yeah.
Did you ever go to the movies or anything?
Yeah, I would try, but I get home at 8:30. And, my sessions are at 5 o'clock in the morning for an hour. And then I get myself together and go in.
The joke between the crew was literally, I think it's on the shirt. It was Wakanda forever and ever and ever and ever. Kept going.
Hi, Miss Carter. Here, Alicia. I've had the great honor of appreciating your work over several years, my whole life. And you have a beautiful way of telling stories with intricate detail in your costumes. What challenges did you face on such a stunt-heavy production? Were there things that you had to sacrifice visually at the hand of stunts and mobility?
Ooh, that's a good question. Are you in production?
Question.
I am, yes.
I could tell that question. Yes, of course there are. You knew the answer to that before you asked. The blue people, the stunt people, could not climb a retaining wall barefoot. They could not work in water and do stunts outside of the water with wet feet. So we bought the Vibrams and we painted them, and then the Vibrams weren't good enough, and so they just wanted to wear tennis shoes. and we were painting tennis shoes blue, and I was like, this is just going to be the death of me. I know it. VFX says they're going to fix it, but I know they're not. So that was one of the big deals about the whole blue concept of how they perform with their feet, mainly. But for the most part, the costumes were made to do stunts in, and we didn't have really any trouble out of them with that. Yeah, the Peter Devlin, I think his last name was our sound guy, and he came to us early, and it showed us the small transmitter, and we made pockets, and we made places for the microphones, and we built it into the costume.
Hi.
One more question.
Right here. Hi. Me and a few of my colleagues, we go to magnet school, and we seen the movie, went to a premiere. And I wanted to ask you, as far as like LGBT youth and representation, what challenges did you face with showing that in the movie? Because I definitely did see some. And how do you?
Where'd you see it?
I mean, even with some of the Dora Milaje, like we seen some of that, and then Shuri, of course. I mean,
I think you don't set out to make that into something. I think what you experienced is what you were supposed to experience, and that is seeing representation. And whether that's intentional or whether that comes from your vision of viewing this and feeling included. And so I don't want to say what was representation, because that really is personal. And you just told me that it was represented in the film. And I appreciate that.
One more. We'll do one more. Two more. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You are so inspiring, and this has been so fulfilling and like rich. Like, could hear you talk all day, girl. I'm Ash. I'm in 705. And I just want to know more about your... Hi. That's so Stacey. More about your process, if that's okay. Like, how do you navigate? Because you have all of these different people helping you, and like you're so... Not surprising to me that you're so like saying all these voices and lifting all these people up who are like so incremental into helping you fulfill all of this. But like, how do you navigate like getting your vision across and also including everyone else, and like finding the space of like letting the reins go in some regards, of like letting people like help you with like being true to like the story and to like everything that's supposed to be realistic and feel like accurate. How do you navigate all that?
Then there's that, yes. Yeah. Let me hear your question. I'll answer them both at the same time.
Hello, my name is Anastasia. I'm also an Otis student, and I was wondering how working with the digital part of it affected your process as well, because like you mentioned, you made the feathers of the headdress stiff because of this CGI or special effects was going to make them move. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on how that affected your work process.
Okay, so everybody got an opinion. And sometimes it's hard to navigate all those opinions. Sometimes you got to let those opinions in, let them in, and then decide. I think on the second one, everybody had a vision of Wakanda. You know, everyone knew what Wakanda was, and they wanted to bring Wakanda. And so I actually had to pull them back and say, we're showing the river province, and the river province looks like this. It doesn't look like all of Wakanda and everything you remember from the first film. It has to be this specific area and this specific look. And I always listen. And the one person I listen the most to is the director. So I'll get a lot of people with creative ideas that don't go along with the director's vision, and I have to navigate that. That's not necessarily always a conversation I have to have with you. I can listen to you and say, thank you very much. I'll talk to you later. but it's difficult because, as I said on the first one, I was like, you guys, this is not The Lion King. This is not coming to America. You know, we had a vision for the first film, and it hadn't been proven, and it hadn't been done before. And so how do we navigate through that aesthetic and keep people on track that wanted to revisit The Lion King, you know, or revisit what they felt was a good idea. That probably was a good idea, but wasn't for us. So it's really tough when you work with this many artists because they're all wonderfully talented. And you have to harness, you know, that's kind of like my job for my department. I have to harness, and I also have to inspire. Nakia's submersible costume had so many people involved with it. The first person had to paint the tribal etchings on a white bodysuit. And some days they were into it and some days they weren't. I was like, come on, Rooster, we got to do this. Come on. And he finished one side of it, and then we had to give it to someone else who mirrored the other side and brought it into the computer. And in front of their computer, they had tribal masks, and they were scanning the masks and bringing in those tribal lines to that submersible costume. And I'm like, come on. What was it, Courtney? Come on, Courtney. You know what that looks like. Let's do it, dude. Let's get it done today. It's like you're a cheerleader at times, you know, and then you go into your office and you close the door and you're just like, oh my God. The things I have to do.
Listen, I will interrupt just so because she can't see herself. But one of the things that happens to your question with Ruth is, and I use this term very sparingly for designers that I work for because I've worked for many of them. Ruth is a creative amplifier, which means that when you work with her, you feel amplified, not drained. And that's the reason why she's able to manage so many people. There are other designers that drain you and you're just like, okay, what do you want me to do?
Who are they by name?
I can't say it. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. But Ruth is not one of them. So that's the reason why she's able to do it.
Well, they belong to this guild. I know that. And so the computer work is only a tool. It's only a tool. You know, there are discussions now about AI and all of it's a tool. It's a great tool. When I first came into costume design in LA, they weren't using computers, you know. They were doing breakdowns, long handwriting, like curly handwriting through page after page. I was like, I can't read your handwriting. And now, you know, we have programs and things that assist us, but it's just a tool. You could be a costume designer and never look at a computer once and do a great, beautiful show without a computer. So it doesn't really intimidate me. I think that I like the idea of infusing technology, and I want to direct, you know, all of my brilliant computer artists towards something organic. You know, if that's even possible, that's where we're trying to get to. Things that don't look like, you know, they're walking on Hollywood Boulevard, that they actually, you know, belong somewhere. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys very much.
A round of applause for Philip and Ruth.